for this trap shit. Sergeant Smack make it backflip. Telly Hank did with the action. With the Vato speaking Spanish. Frank Matthews, how I vanish. Poof. Came back like I'm King Tut. Gold BBS is on a beamer. When Fat Cat was 10 queens up. Ball off the profit, not the re-up. Fly like Puerto Rican Jesus. Uptown like I'm Baby May. Just caught a touchdown from the Bay.
According to authorities, Underwood's gang killed as many as 23 people, Mr. Nonviolent Drug Offense, and Underwood himself allegedly ordered the murder of Bobby Edmonds, a witness who was going to testify against a member of the gang.
You are here in the vicinity, a little bit north of 125th Street in the Harlem River. How is it that you recognize this location?
Where I dumped him.
I beg your pardon?
This is where I dumped him.
After Nicky Barnes went to jail, the Vigilantes took over the heroin trade in this section of Harlem.
The word on the street was that he got paid from the proceeds of a double homicide that the Sweeper brothers did. Nathaniel Sleeper was a cold-blooded killer. He was involved in at least 10 homicides with the Vigilantes.
He discusses past killings as a kind of oral resume. So the supposed drug dealer will hire him and his group, called the Vigilantes, to kill.
Vigilantes put a murder contract out on me.
We ready to ice pick this nigga back in his head.
The judge said I had to give up the witness's name or I would be held in contempt of court.
7 hours later, that witness was shot to death.
The district attorney asked me who was the head of the Vigilantes. The next day, the New York Daily News headline read, he was the manager of a funk band called Slave. And then later in the 80s, he was the manager of a boy band called New Edition.
Bill Underwood made some mistakes as a young man, but even before his arrest, Bill Underwood had turned his life all the way around and was being productive. He has so much to offer to society, and to keep him continually locked up and locked away is a crime.
He is a model prisoner, has been a mentor to so many incarcerated men. So when I think about who he is today at 66 years old, he's someone that deserves a second chance. The laws that put him into prison back then have now been overturned and overruled. And so he's in prison with this life without parole sentence, and he should have been home a long time ago. And so I just feel like at this point, I've done everything. We've done everything. We're exhausted. I'm exhausted. My siblings are exhausted. It's just like time for him to come home already.
Back to our Inside the Issue special. Just a couple of days ago, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey unveiled a highly aggressive criminal justice bill that he hopes will ignite his dying and pathetic presidential campaign. The bill, Booker's bill, would allow any prisoner who's been in prison for 10 years or more to petition for release. If they're over 50 years old, the burden of proof would be on the government to keep them behind bars. In essence, criminals would have to be retried over and over and over again. Now, Booker named this bill in honor of a man he believes is unjustly imprisoned, a man called William Underwood. So who is William Underwood exactly? Well, recently over on MSNBC, a reporter called Leanne Caldwell ran a profile of Mr. Underwood, and she suggested he really deserves to be the face of criminal justice reform. In Caldwell's telling, Underwood is a kindly man who simply made a minor mistake, and America's vicious criminal justice system destroyed him for life because it's racist.
William Underwood, now 65 years old, was sentenced to life in prison without parole for a nonviolent drug-related crime. It was his first felony, but in the middle of a tough-on-crime era, the judge showed no leniency.
Well, it's every cliche you can imagine packed into a single paragraph. Let's unpack them a little bit. A nonviolent drug-related crime. Well, Caldwell knows exactly what she's doing. When you say nonviolent drug offense, most people think about their friend who got caught with a joint in college and went to jail for it. Obviously, nobody wants that. That's absurd. Leanne Caldwell and Cory Booker want to make it clear William Underwood is one of those, and he belongs back on the streets because, hey man, he didn't really do anything wrong. The fact that he isn't suggests that America is malicious or, of course, racist, probably both, actually, of course. There's a problem, though. Nobody in America is actually given a life sentence for a single minor nonviolent drug offense. It just doesn't happen. Our prisons are too crowded to waste time on things like that and people like that, and it would be wrong. So we don't do it. Underwood is no exception. Columnist Ann Coulter actually took the time to find out what Underwood was convicted of, something that apparently nobody else in Washington thought to do. And it turns out it was far worse than having a couple of joints at a party. In fact, Underwood was not a petty criminal. He was a deadly criminal. As many contemporary news reports make clear, the nonviolent drug offense Underwood was convicted of was running the Vigilantes. That was one of New York's deadliest drug gangs from the late 1970s until 1988, which was really the height of the crack epidemic. If you lived through it, you know it was not a small thing. It was horrifying. According to authorities, Underwood's gang killed as many as 23 people, Mr. Nonviolent Drug Offense, and Underwood himself allegedly ordered the murder of Bobby Edmonds, a witness who was going to testify against a member of the gang. Underwood's gang publicly declared that it would murder anybody, no questions asked, if they were given a gun, a photograph, and $10,000. Underwood himself, according to one former gang member, instructed those under him to read about famous gangsters and murderers from history and try to imitate them. When Underwood was finally brought down, he was convicted after, listen to this, the testimony of more than 50 witnesses, including several former members of the Vigilantes, Mr. Nonviolent Drug Offense. So yeah, William Underwood was never convicted of a violent crime. Neither was Al Capone. That doesn't matter. He committed vicious crimes, apparently, and got others to commit them on his behalf. He deserves to be in prison for what he did. But NBC and Cory Booker don't see a problem with any of this. They lied by omission about Underwood's crimes for the sake of getting him and others like him out of prison. Here's how Cory Booker summed up Underwood's life. Listen.
Would you offer clemency to someone like William Underwood?
Hell yes. Hell yes. I told you, it should disturb all of us that there are people like Mr. Underwood in prison. He would be one of the thousands of people that there's just no argument to make about why we're spending billions of dollars incarcerating them.
Oh, they're such liars. Gang leaders who smuggle heroin and kill dozens of people. Booker and NBC News want people like him, many thousands of them, back on the streets. And it's no mystery why. They'll never blame deadly criminals for being deadly criminals. They blame America for being an evil, racist country. They blame you. Cory Booker says America's prisons are the new Jim Crow. The most demagogic thing you could say. So what a total lie that is. In other words, the problem isn't William Underwood, who sold drugs and ordered other people's murders. The problem is you. You're a racist for wanting to be protected from people like William Underwood. Yeah, you get it. Kind of flipping it around a little bit.
My name is Ebony Underwood. My father, William Underwood, has been incarcerated for the past 26 years. My siblings and I have been fighting diligently to get him home after 26 years. Hopefully we will. And for us, whatever day he comes home, it'll be considered Father's Day. Me and my siblings have been fighting this fight for a long time to get our dad home, particularly my eldest brother, Anthony.
So for the longest time, we've been, my sisters and I, we've been helping my father any way we can. But about 3 years ago, a friend of his who hadn't seen him in like 20 years reconnected with him. And she was going back and forth to D.C. and she got the attention of a lawyer named Nikishi Taifa.
Oh my goodness, the Underwood family has been absolutely phenomenal. That's what really first caught my attention, their dedication and their consistency with respect to seeking clemency for their father, and also seeking to shine a spotlight on these issues of other people serving these sentences as well.
My father's been an incredible dad, always. He's very present, always been in my life. That all changed dramatically in 1988 when he was sentenced under the draconian mandatory minimums.
It was December 6, 1988. I spent the day like any other high school kid, just playing around with friends, and I came home, and when I came home, I realized something must have been wrong because my door was open. And then when I walked in, it was all these federal agents, different agencies, different letters on the back of their jackets. And it was kind of crazy for me because I was numb at that moment. I saw my little brother and my father's girlfriend sitting on the floor crying.
And he was charged with what's called a RICO conspiracy. Now, RICO stands for Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, and it actually is a very, very broad conspiracy provision that originally was used against the mafia. But again, it began to be used within the war on drugs that was coming up at that particular time. And William Underwood was really one of the first cases under what was called the Drug Abuse Act of 1988.
The laws that he was sentenced under have since changed. And the laws that he was sentenced under have now become unconstitutional, and they've been overturned by the Supreme Court.
We're talking about cases where people are serving very, very long, harsh, mandatory minimum sentences. We're talking about cases where in many instances the law has changed, and but for the fact that these laws were not made retroactive, many of these people, such as William Underwood, still languish in prison.
So that's like telling slaves, oh, we know slavery is wrong, but we're going to end slavery, but you still got to be slaves, but we're going to free your children.
So since these laws haven't been made retroactive for my dad, my siblings and I now believe our only hope is for President Obama to grant our dad clemency.
When the Obama administration came out last year with the initiative that said that if you feel you've been in prison for too long, if you know that the law has changed in your case, to file petitions for commutation for me, i.e. the president, to consider. And a whole initiative called Clemency Project 2014 sprouted up as a result of that. And then I said, that's it. That is the opening that we can use in the one Underwood case. We might be able to find some relief.
When my dad comes home, the first thing I want to do, I want to go to the movies to get a big bucket of popcorn and some Twizzlers and watch the new Star Wars with Lupita Nyong'o, and oh man, it's gonna be incredible.
I would have a Maybach pick him up from the prison. The prison is a half an hour from Atlantic City. Get him a nice massage and a bath and just enjoy himself, not worry about anything. And that's what I would do, and then fly him back in a helicopter from Atlantic City to New York. So that's what I would do.
It'll be considered Father's Day. For whatever day he comes home, it'll be Father's Day.
Could you imagine getting a life sentence over a nonviolent drug offense? And not only that, it's your first felony. It's mob tie shit. What up, though? Shit got Popalot. We on our way to NYC with it. Uptown. Y'all meet us in Harlem. Now, today, we are taking a trip back to the 70s era. And I'm going to tell you the story about a heroin kingpin who was also allegedly the leader of one of the most violent drug/stick-up gangs that would change his life. So much so, where he would presumably be managing one of the first and biggest boy bands ever. And that person that I'm talking about is going to be a guy by the name of William Underwood. Now, Mr. Underwood, who will be granted a compassionate release by Joe Biden not long ago, has a story and a life that's worth a movie. And that movie probably would start in Harlem in the 1970s, probably after the arrest of Nicky Barnes. It would be right around then when, according to authorities, William Underwood would found the notorious Vigilantes, who the New York Times would label as a 40-member gang that would be linked to up to 15 murders. According to his indictment, in the early 1970s, William Underwood would organize the Vigilantes, who they would label as a street-level heroin distribution operation that was based in West Harlem. According to the indictment, in the period from the early 70s to the early 80s, the organization would grow under Underwood's leadership, forming retail operations across New York City, importing heroin, as well as co-signing wholesale quantities of heroin to other distributors. If y'all remember, I said this movie takes place right after the arrest of Nicky Barnes in the commission. So you have to think of the power vacuum, especially in the drug game, that would leave open. And based on a lot of my research, William Underwood and the Vigilantes would fill a big part of that void. Now, throughout that decade, according to the authorities, Underwood's organization would go on to sell between 3 and 5.5 kilograms of heroin per week. The government would describe the Vigilantes as an extremely violent group, with 3 brothers probably being the most violent of the group. Sam, Frank, and probably the most violent of them all, Nathaniel Nook Sweeper. Being connected to 10 murders himself, authorities would label him as the hitman of the Vigilantes. Now, in the late 80s is rolling around. Crack is heavily into play, especially in New York, and I don't know if that have anything to do with it. Maybe he made enough money in the heroin game, or probably he smelt the feds coming. But William Underwood would end up getting out the game, and he would set his sights on the music industry, and he would eventually strike gold when he would find himself the manager of the iconic group New Edition. During the course of my research, I read that in 1986, the FBI would investigate William Underwood, but that investigation would be dropped due to the lack of information. But in 1988, William Underwood would be charged with various crimes arising from his leadership of the Vigilantes. Just like they had done with Nicky Barnes a decade before, they would charge him with a slew of racketeering charges, or the RICO. And in 1990, after a jury trial, William Underwood would be convicted of all 4 charges. And that's part of the first round of drug convictions that was made under the newly enacted federal sentencing guidelines of 1987 and the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988. He will receive 3 mandatory minimum sentences of 20 years on the drug conspiracy charges. But it will be that 4th charge, participating or being the head of a continuing criminal organization, that would get him a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And if you could only imagine him being in his 40s with a family, facing his first felony conviction, and he ends up with a life sentence. And it would be 33 years from that day he was arrested in 1988, from when he would see freedom, when he would be granted a compassionate release under the administration of Joe Biden. And covering his case, you will be surprised how many people are serving life sentences or unjust sentences for nonviolent drug crimes. And in the very near future, we're going to bring y'all some of these cases just so y'all can see how crazy it is. Now, y'all make sure y'all hit the red subscribe button and the bell right under this video so y'all know when this real Trill Spill shit is dropping. Y'all get in the comment box. Y'all run it up. Y'all let me know what cities we need to go to, what stories we need to tell, what I got wrong, where I haven't been yet, and what else we need to talk about. Now, if y'all prefer to do it on a more personal basis, y'all know y'all could always tap in with me on Instagram, Twitter, POP_A_LOT. And y'all know the rundown. I'm going to be back with some more mob shit ASAP. Sugar Popalot.